Welcome to the Architectural Showdown, Temple of Hercules Victorious versus the Pantheon. The two buildings express two archetypes. Archetype intended as an original model or pattern, a prototype, but also as one of the inherited mental images postulated by Carl Jung as the content of the collective unconscious. The exterior space, Trilithic archetype. Trilithic derived from Greek words tria, three, and lithos, stone, and the interior space, cave archetype. The architecture of buildings and urban spaces can be investigated starting from a mutual relationship between solid and void, the external space defined by solid objects, the internal space understood as void. The oldest evidence of places built and inhabited by man are an expression of these two archetypes. There are many Trilithic archaic monuments, the most famous Stonehenge, and many prehistoric caves all over the world. Different linguistic principles descend from these two archetypes. In particular, the Temple of Hercules expressed the linguistic principle of the Trilithic form, space as an object. The Pantheon expressed the linguistic principle of the cave form, space as a whole. Let's delve deep into these two linguistic principles, starting from the Hercules Temple. Dating back to the 2nd century BCE, this Greek-style temple in Rome showcases the hallmark features of Greek architecture. Its elegant pillars, known as Corinthian columns, stand proud, displaying proportion, harmony, and elegance. The temple dedicated to Hercules was crafted with pure Pentelic marble from Greece, emphasizing its derivation from Greek models. The main features of the Trilithic principle we recognize in the Hercules Temple are accurate distinction of the elements of the building, sculptural appearance of the architectonic object. In the Hercules Temple, we distinguish A. the low-step basement, B. the vertical elements, columns and cylindrical wall of the cell, C. the tablature that connects the columns, no longer present, D. the conic roof. The column itself is a sculptural element. Accurate distinction of the buildings between them and diagonal anti-perspective viewpoints. The temple was part of the ancient Forum Boarium in Rome. Like in other most famous and unprecedented Greek examples, such as the Athene Acropolis, for example, the buildings have different orientations not dictated by principles of symmetry. They create a dynamic and open space, also in relation to the surrounding landscape, through the simple juxtaposition, without contact, of simple elements characterized by a clear stereometry and figurative unity. The different points of view are in a dynamic-like cinema sequence and always angular and diagonal. The closure of forms into stereometric figures. The Greek temple or Egyptian pyramid were structures to be looked at from outside. One was not allowed to enter them. One enjoyed their geometric perfection, the harmony of their proportions, but they were not livable as architectural spaces. The use of the module as a technique and as a method. The study of proportions. The Greek temple used the module as a technique and as a method. Proportions of single elements and of the whole create harmony and beauty. The predominance of the exterior space over the interior and the relationship between the building and the natural landscape, because the interior cells of the temples were forbidden access. The Trilithic structure is fully developed in the architecture of classical Greece, which expresses at the highest level the language of the discontinuity of elements and the continuity of organized ensembles. Now, let's turn our attention to the awe-inspiring Pantheon. Built centuries later, 124 AD, this architectural marvel is a testament to Roman engineering expertise. With Roman architecture comes inner space, and with it, the light that structures it. The Pantheon stands as the epitome of the archetypal principle in spatial and architectural design, the principle of the cave. The main features of the space as a whole and articulation by elements principle we recognize in the Pantheon are: space as totality. The archetypal principle of the cave emphasized the interior space as an empty space, clearly separated from the exterior, a space in which the continuity of the constituent elements merge into an organic form. Pantheon embodies a secluded inner void separated from the external, with minimal openings to the outside world, represented by the entrance door and the oculus for the light. This is achieved through the structural use of arches and the utilization of concrete as a construction material. The search of synthesis. It is possible to consider the element, intended as a fragment of totality, always in all its spatial reality. The definition of an element is a figure in possession of a totality. In the Pantheon, we have the compenetration and the synthesis of two main elements, the cylinder of the perimeter of the building and the sphere of the vault, reduced to the hemisphere following its interpretation with a cylindric shape. The sense of totality of interior spaces. The vaulted structures and their material and technology create a sense of continuity and totality of spaces, from vertical elements to horizontal ones. The Pantheon fully expresses the principle of the continuous enveloping wall that transitions from vertical to horizontal. The sense of totality of the complex articulations built by elements. During the Hellenistic period, and then in Roman architecture, the idea of space evolved from the classical model, see the first linguistic principle of the examples of the Acropolis of Athens shown above, where there is the careful distinction of buildings in empty space in relation to the surrounding landscape, to that of a space articulated in a continuous sequence of open and closed places, communicating through buildings with porticos. The same happened for a Pantheon that originally was not isolated monument, but element of an articulated sequence of spaces and buildings. The Roman lesson is commonly understood both as architecture of the totality, of the strong and unitary space, with greater emphasis on the interior, and as architecture of articulation, repetition, architecture of autonomous elements, close together, interpenetrating, rotated, and, in any case, integrated with each other. This principle distinctly belongs to the Roman architecture, contrasting the Trilithic principle typical of Greek architecture, as evident in the forecourt preceding the rotunda derived from the Trilithic columned temple. The Pantheon seamlessly merges the architecture of Hellenistic Greek temple with the distinctly Roman concept of vaulted wall space. Upon entering the Pantheon, one engages with an ancestral archetypal principle that profoundly influences our unconscious. The interior not only showcases architectural brilliance, but also encapsulates a design philosophy deeply rooted in the psychological impact of space. So, which architectural masterpiece reigns supreme? The Temple of Hercules, with its Greek elegance, or the awe-inspiring Pantheon, with its Roman ingenuity? Neither of the two. Both represent two linguistic principles in architecture, sometimes separate, sometimes integrated, which together with other linguistic principles run through the history of architecture far beyond styles, latitudes, and historical epochs. To go deeper to understand architecture interpreted this way, see my Archabout free webinar clicking on the link in the description below. Join the discussion in the comments below and let us know which architectures and urban spaces in your experience can be related to one of the two linguistic principles explained in the video. Just as an example, I propose two modern architectures in Berlin. The New National Gallery by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, a clear example of the application of Trilithic form principle, with a clear distinction of a strong plinth, few vertical metal supports and glazed walls, and a thick parallelepiped-shaped roof. And the Berlin Philharmonie Concert Hall by Hans Scharoun, an example of the application of the space as a whole and articulation by elements principle, with a sense of a totality of interior organic spaces through complex articulations built by elements. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more original captivating contents on the history and architecture of Rome. Stay tuned.